Now that I've kind of got this stained glass technique down, how can I create works of art using this technique? Hey guys, it's Sarah, and welcome to my studio. I posted a video on stained glass a couple weeks ago, and I was really kind of blown away by everybody's response. Everybody really kind of liked the idea for the most part, and were really kind of curious to implement it. I had some really nice feedback in the comment section about stained glass, one of which being have I had given any thought to using a particular PETG profile that would allow me to really create a very clear as glass effect with the filament. And I hadn't actually looked at that. So shout out to the commenter who left that. That was a great rabbit hole to kind of dive down a bit. I don't work a lot in PETG, but if you're wanting to do stained glass and particularly maybe in areas where it is much hotter and you might be wanting to hang your stained glass outside where temperatures can get particularly hot, you might want to actually use PETG rather than PLA. Where I live, it hasn't really been an issue, but I'm also admittedly not keeping my pieces outside. Mine are more indoor decorative ones, but that is something to keep in mind. That being said, I actually played around with that profile a little bit and I worked with, I think this is Overture Clear PETG. So this was the sample that I got. And I know with the camera, with the light reflection, it's hard to see, but it is pretty transparent. Like it gives a pretty nice effect. I took that profile, messed around with it a little bit, and worked to create a version for PLA. This was the same ones that I did with clear. As you can see, comes out pretty clear. Again, I'm getting kind of that reflection. There you go. You can see a little bit. And then I also applied that to the octagram pattern that I really like that gives this nice reflective star. It also makes this glass a lot more see-through than the pieces that I did in my previous project. I really kind of like that. Doing it on the PEY holographic plate will give it a nice reflective surface on one side and then the opposite side having a little bit of texture. What I also started playing around with a little bit was also blending my colors. I've got several transparent filaments, but I kind of wanted to see if I could expand my spectrum a little bit. And I know that probably sounds a little strange to some people, like why do more colors? And I think it's because I'm coming from sort of the artist perspective of things, and that a lot of times what I'm doing here on my channel isn't so much about making objects in bulk and selling a bunch to, make a living off of this. Like that's not what I do. I don't run a print farm here. You can see I have two 3D printers. I have my studio here and I do outside work, and it does provide some income, but I'm a small creator. This is still more in, hobby small business job. It's not my primary job. And ultimately a lot of what I like doing, and the reason that I do this is because I like to kind of create works of art. I don't see this so much as a fabrication business. How much can I produce and how much money can I make off of it? It's not my goal here. And if you're looking for cheap, easy prints to sell and make a lot of money off of, you're on the wrong channel. I'm sorry. I like really pushing the boundaries of what can I create. So for instance, now that I've kind of got this stained glass technique down for, me, how can I create works of art using this technique? And how can I really push, those boundaries and get the colors that I want and the effects that I want? That's, to me, is kind of what's important. And particularly with the piece that I'm going to show you guys today, I'm creating sort of a lamp that features a beach scene, and I wanted to be able to create an ombre effect with the waves. I also wanted to be able to kind of get a sandy gold color for the sand. And I had, orange, and I've got yellow. And I was thinking about the fact that these are transparent filaments, and having played around a little bit with the Hue Forge concept of things and blending filaments, I thought I'd give that a try. And as a result, produced this really beautiful shade of gold that is the color that I want for sand, just by layering the yellow and the orange a couple different times. And knowing that I could do that, I could then take the colors of the waves that I'm wanting to work with and create sort of that same effect and produce an ombre effect. So that's kind of where I'm kind of coming from, is sort of that artistic side of things, is creating works of art using this technology. Now, again, if you're wanting absolutely transparent glass, you're not going to pull that off with PLA. You're not going to pull that off with PETG. It doesn't happen. You can get extremely close, like maybe not with the concentric star one, but I mean, with the clear ones, I mean, I can lay this down and I can read through it. It's not an issue. But if you're wanting, completely clear, transparent, you're going to need to actually use a piece of acrylic, which is something that I may do in the future as well. I'm going to show you the settings that I've got figured out to get these nice clear effects with PLA, and then I will show you my final result. Okay. So today I'm not going to be showing you as much construction stuff in CAD software, partly because I went over how to do the stained glass in a previous video, and I will leave a link in the description for that, but I did want to show you my file. This run around, I wanted to create sort of a lamp, either with like a, mini tea light or maybe an LED bulb that I could put in here. And what I wanted to do was create sort of this pretty C pattern. So I set this up in Illustrator and then went through and created it the same way I did last time, where I've got things broken down, where you have the glass pieces and then you have the frame. As you can see here, all of that set up. And this one's a little bit extra special in that there is some additional details that are going to be on top of the glass. As you can see, it looks like they're floating here in space, but when I put the glass underneath, you'll see that they'll actually be 3D printed on top of the little fake stained glass pieces. So I've gone in and done that little detail. And then I've also created this frame, as you can see here, for where the glass pieces are inset. So that's how I set up the CAD file. I know I'm not going into much detail this run around. If you guys want to in the future, I could potentially kind of go into how I put this together, but honestly, it was a little bit more frustrating, and so I didn't end up recording it. But in terms of creating the stained glass pieces, I do have a video where I show how I do that with a simpler design that you can follow along. But now that I've gotten everything created, I'm going to send this over to Bambu Studio. I'm going to show you how I set it up using both the star pattern that I showed you, as well as the smoother, clear looking print file that will create sort of PLA glass. Now let's talk a little bit about glass settings. I will leave a link to the PETG profile on MakerWorld that I found the original settings and tweaked with. That way I can give credit, and if you're wanting to use that for a PETG, you certainly can. But I'm going to show you my glass settings that I've kind of tailored from that as well. That way you can kind of save your own settings. What I ended up going with for the layer height, each of my layers are going to be 0.2 millimeter thick, with the exception of the initial layer being 0.1 millimeter. And then I have most of the line width set to 0.5 millimeters, with the exception of the default still being set at 0.42. Seam position, you can do nearest, you can do aligned. I, with my pieces, haven't really found it to matter a whole lot, so I just have it set at nearest using the scarf seam application. Didn't mess with any of the precision. I didn't turn on any of the ironing. I have the walls set to classic, and then I have in advanced settings, I have avoid crossing the wall set to 400%, with it avoid crossing the wall being turned on. Then over here in strength, this is where things change up a little bit. I have 2 wall loops selected. And then for the top surface pattern, this is going to vary on whether or not I'm trying to get the sort of smooth glass effect or if I am wanting to create the octagram pattern. So I have mine set for this one is my flat one. So I have the top surface pattern set to aligned rectangular. The bottom surface pattern is monotonic. Infill is rectilinear. And then the sparse infill pattern is also set to aligned rectangular, with it set as the density of 100%. These pieces are honestly going to be small enough that you're really not going to get much of an infill, but you want to keep the infill and the top and bottom surface patterns all the same. Now, I have the top shells set to 0, the bottom shell set to 0, and then the top paint penetration layers set to 5. I believe the bottom one's set to 3. Now, it looks like you can't change these, and that's just because I need to click top shell layers onto 1. When I do that, then these open back up and I can change them, and then you can, once you set it to 0, they will lock back up. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because a lot of times I will print more than one piece on a plate. So for instance, on my little sample here, you've got one with the octagram spiral and one with the plain pattern. What I'll do is I will actually set it to this pattern, like the standard one, and then over in objects, I'll pick the one that I want to be octagram, and I will go in and change the octagram pattern by unlocking it, turning that to 1, setting this to octagram, 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 and then locking it back up. by setting it to 0. And I do that honestly because it's easier just to go from the plane pattern to the octagram pattern, because I know I have to just change all of them to octagram versus trying to remember which one is like rectilinear versus monotonic. It's just easier to go from one to the other. But I do have a separate profile setup if I'm doing all of them in the star pattern, the octagram pattern, so that those can automatically be set. But if I'm doing more than one piece on a plate in a different pattern, this is how I do it, by changing it by object in the strength section. That is the only difference between the two profiles, is the surface patterns and the infill pattern. So going up back over to global to continue my settings here. So you've got all of that. Like I said, the infill is 100% aligned rectangular, or if you're doing the star one, then it's set to octagram. I think these were all default, but just in case, I've got it set to 400%, 20, and then advanced infill wall overlap is 15, infill direction 0, bridge direction 0, minimum threshold 15 millimeters. And then I go over to speed. A lot of things here are different than your typical speed settings, and that is that everything is going very slow. The trick to getting a nice clear glass piece is to go slow and steady, and that means turning everything down. So yes, that means these pieces are definitely going to be printed slower. However, slow and steady wins the race, and I think the results are worth it. So I have my initial layer and infill speed set to 20. Walls are set to 25. 50% for the perimeters. I've got infill set to 20. Vertical shell speed to 80. Top surface 20. And then my travel speed I have turned down to 5,000. The normal printing speed I have turned down to 9,500, travel 500, and then the rest 250. And part of that is initially when I was doing my first layer, I would sometimes have it be completely finished and then it would go to move and it would potentially drag the tip in just the right way that it would actually make a bit of a mark along the print. I don't know if maybe it's a Z retraction issue with my machine, but honestly, just turning the travel speed down eliminated that problem. Support wise, I don't think I have anything because I don't use support. And then others, I have mine automatically set to do it by object, but you don't necessarily have to have it done by object. You could also do it by layers. I will often turn this on to by layer, especially if I'm mixing the pieces and doing more than one color. You're going to need to turn layers, have it print by layer. That way you can alternate the colors. So those are the settings that I use for Glass PLA. What you can do is you can just kind of load them in, and then you can click save, and you can save it as a user preset, however you want. I have mine set. I've got Glass PLA. I've got Glass Star, which is my octagram pattern. I also have a concentric one that I played around with, which is doing more of a circle design where it just gives me these triangles. I didn't like it quite as much, but it is certainly an option if you want. And that's really just, again, kind of changing the pattern to concentric all the way through. Now that I've shown you how you can do the patterns and how you can create this transparent glass, let me show you how I set up my current project and got it ready for print. A couple other details I want to bring up with in terms of getting a really nice glass finish. One being that you're going to want to get a smooth holographic plate, and I will leave a link to some of them that you can find fairly inexpensive on Amazon. That's kind of where I got mine. A couple tips with working with those: you want to make sure the plate is absolutely clean. That is completely free of oils. In fact, I've actually gotten into the habit of, when I'm handling the plates or removing prints from those plates, to actually put on a pair of nitrile gloves. And that is to keep the oil from my hands from getting onto the plate. It buys me a little more time in between cleanings, but you still need to clean your plate on a regular basis. I recommend, honestly, using dishwater soap like Dawn or Palmolive. Either of those will work, and scrubbing with a mildly abrasive brush. Then I will usually wipe it down with an alcohol pad to make it completely clean. And then before putting it in the machine to do a print run, I will usually coat the plate with a coat of hairspray so that it helps with adhesion. Even with these plates being super clean, the manufacturer recommends using a coat of hairspray or some glue stick to help get the prints to adhere. I personally really recommend doing hairspray. I feel like that does a good job. And I know it seems kind of counterintuitive that you just clean the plate and then you're going to coat it with hairspray, but it's a different material, so it does not cause a residue on the print. I've never really seen that to be an issue. If I ever end up with an imperfect surface on my 3D prints, my glass 3D prints, it's usually in the shape of like a fingerprint, and I know that it's because of oil from my hands. So clean your plates, handle them with gloves, and use hairspray for adhesion. All right, so we're over here in Bambu Studio, and what I've done is I have opened up the glass portion that was exported out. When I went and I exported my 3D print file, it exported out 3 different files, one being the glass, one being the frame, and then one being the base, because those were the top level folders that I had in Shaper. So I've just opened up the glass because I need to get all the glass pieces printed first before I go and do all of the additional printing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and separate things out a little bit by color. I'm going to need 4 copies of this, so it probably will be the easiest. Yeah, they're all separate pieces, so that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and make life a little easier. I'm just going to add a couple of plates. I'm going to take my sand piece, which is all one color, and I'm going to put it over here. I will probably end up, if I imagine, I'm going to probably need 2 plates. Yep. So, okay. So I will need to print 2 of these and make myself a little note if I can type. I'm going to need my water, and I have this one, and I'm going to need 3 more copies of it, so I get 4. All right. So there's 4 copies of that color. I've got this one here, and I'm going to need 3 copies of it, which that's very strange. Oh, I know why. It helps if you make sure you're focusing on the right plate. And then I need 3 copies of this one. Yeah, organize it. You can do that. And I'm also going to name my plate. So this is base ocean blue. All of these are pretty much set and ready to go, at least lined up. Now I need to take all of these and I actually need to rotate them around 180 degrees, which is interesting. I guess it does it all as one big group. I'll have to go in and fix all of my plates real quick. Now, the reason for flipping all of them is because I want the side that's going to be up and facing out to be shiny. So to have that kind of surface, reflective surface that we're going to get with the PEY plates. So I am going to make sure that those are the ones that are printed down. So that's why I did 180 on all of these. So now it just comes time for doing coloring. So I'm going to go ahead and let's throw in my colors here a little bit. So I'm going to start, and you guys, a bunch of you guys asked about this interface here and with the colored pencils. This is actually part of like the Mac OS color face. Like when you go to select colors, it gives you a couple different options. You get like the spectrum. You can pick from like some various colors, like color palettes. Like I can even get in here to one of my favorite color palettes that I loaded system-wide. I've got my wheel, all of that, but you can, if you want to, just pick from colored pencils if it makes life easy. So that's actually how I did that. There's nothing, like I didn't do anything magical. That's completely Apple. So I'm gonna, first color is, that I'm gonna add is blue. I'm going to need a turquoisey teal color that I have. I'm going to be using white. I have a sand color, which is kind of a yellow. I'm also going to be using sort of a pink for the starfish, and then finally a purple for my shells. So let's go in here and get things colored. So what I can do is I can go in here and I can select all of these, and these are going to be in white. Grab my other plate over here, my other foams, make those white. I've got my sand prints. These are going to be in yellow. I'm actually going to do some mixing of colors, believe it or not, but I'm going to do that over in slicing method. So I'll show you that in a second. Let me finish getting all my colors assigned here. My ocean teal, it's going to be that color. My ocean mix, I'm going to leave the blue for now. And then my starfish are all going to be pink. And my shells are going to be purple. And I am going to go ahead, merge those as a group. I'm going to merge those as starfish 1 and starfish 2 as a group. And my reasoning for doing that is because on this plate, I'm going to print by object. Basically, it'll reduce the number of color changes for that. So that is what I'm going to do there. So that will make things easy. Otherwise, everything else is set color-wise. So let's get things processed globally. I'm going to use, so what I'm going to do, since it's a little easier to remember which ones I need to change to go to the octagram spiral. I'm going to actually go ahead and swap those. So for the seafoam plate ones, seafoam plate, I'm going to go in here, grab all my seafoams, and then under strength, they're grayed out just because I have, I need a top shell turned on. Then I can easily fix it. Our octagram spiral, set that back to 0. There we go. So that's plate 7. This plate over here also needs octagram spiral set. Okay, and then over here, I am also going to pick my sand pieces, and I'm going to turn these two octagram spiral. All right, now we should be good for everything to print and slice. I want to kind of play around with some colors. I am kind of engaging a little bit in sort of a hue forge technique in that you can sort of mix colors a little bit because these are so transparent to get a different effect. So my ocean blue, I want to leave blue. My ocean teal, I want to leave too, but my ocean mixed, I want to mix up a little bit. I need to go in here. I want to kind of change back and forth between colors. Now there's 8 layers. So, I mean, I really could flip back and forth as many times as I want. So we've got 1 layer, 2 layer. Before the 3rd layer, I'm going to change the 5th layer. I'm going to change back. Before layer 8. So it's before layer 7, you change to layer 7, layer 8. So this is going to flip back and forth with this one. Hopefully that'll look kind of cool. And then I actually want to do the same thing, but I need to add a color. I'm going to add an orange. And then I'm actually going to do the same thing with the sand print as well. And I'm going to flip back and forth between, but I think it'll be kind of a cool effect. So, and what's nice about this is since each of these plates are set up to be printed kind of on their own, while it's going to take a little while, it's not going to waste a lot of material since I'm only really engaging in some color changes, either where it's moving from one color to another or the flips are pretty, simple, straightforward. So I'll get my glass printed and then I will start working on getting all of the frames printed and we'll start loading them up. So the total print time for all of the glass was about 21 hours. Now I was using both Eve and Wally to do the print job, which you would think would have maybe sped things up a little bit, but I did run into a couple of issues because 3D printing, of course there's going to be issues. One of the problems was with one of the pieces. It wasn't until I got to the very top and then it started having some weird skipping action. I still can't decide if it was a just, slicing G-code error or if it ended up being more of the file itself, like the actual 3D shape. I ended up going all the way back and just kind of remaking the shape, re-extruding it, and sending it back out as like a step or an STL file. I did one of those and it fixed at least that problem. The other problem, of course, being clogs. Now, clogs happen all the time where, maybe filament breaks somewhere along the path. It's like clogs sort of kind of run the gambit. Everything from, oh, this isn't seated quite right in the AMS, easy fix, to, oh, I've got one stuck along the line. And if I'm lucky, it's an easy pull in the back. If it's a little more complicated, I'm stuck, opening up the AMS unit and getting into one of the PFTE tubes in the bottom. That's more annoying. What's a step up from that would then be one of those lovely clogs that requires me turning the machine off, unscrewing the nozzle, and having to do the magic stick effect to get that piece out. I thought that was the most frustrating of clogs. Nope, I stand corrected. Wally threw in that one, as I put it to my husband. I had to take the extruder apart, pull out the motor head that's in there. It actually took a while to get the tubing off so that I could actually just like walk with that portion of the machine. And then I'm like trying to get this out and I ended up having to completely disassemble the motor head to get to this tiny little spot where it had just, I don't know, thickened, clogged. It was above the cutting point, so I don't think that was the issue. I don't know, but definitely I have at this point fixed every clog, but that would be the holy grail of clogs. By the way, big thank you to the YouTuber Taptic Digital. He has a video where he breaks down taking apart the motor head for that exact same clog, like mine was in the exact same spot. I will leave that video in the description because that is definitely a resource you're going to want to save. I'm not going to recreate it. He did a fantastic job, but what was particularly frustrating was that one was once I got that clog out, I was so excited, and then put it back in the machine, and in the process, Failed to also notice that I needed to take a clogged portion out of the nozzle, so I was still having problems, and that fixed that problem, only to realize I'd also left a piece in the top where the PFTE tubing was, and it was preventing it in, so which required me actually taking it back out a second time to find that. Yeah, it was the nat one of clogs. I kid you not. And I am sorry for the tangent, but I felt y'all could sympathize and could enjoy a story. But needless to say, while it is working again, I have a spare motor head with stainless steel gears coming, that in the event that that happens again, I'm just going to change the part out. Admittedly, it's not happened in the almost 2 years that I've had the machine, so I'm hoping it was just a one-off occurrence and it won't happen again. Getting back on track, now that I have the stained glass pieces done, let's get the frames printed and put together.
Yep, definitely worth the effort.
I really like how this turned out. I like the color combinations that I was able to put together. I like the gold metallic finish that I've got with this particular filament color. Multiple people asked me about that actually in the comment section on my 3D printed pins, because they were like, what gold did you use? Because that actually looks like gold versus some of the other colors. And you're absolutely right with that. It's kind of funny, like what so many different brands call as gold versus like real life gold. Like that to me was very frustrating. And I think I stumbled onto that color because when I first started printing, I had gotten a bunch of the Mika 3D rolls, like a sample roll, and it had a bunch of colors in it, a bunch of metallics. And I believe they had one that was called coffee gold, and I really liked the way that looked. That looked like gold. The downside is they only really sell theirs in 500-gram rolls, so that's kind of a problem with my AMS. So I ended up kind of looking for a similar color. I don't know if Amazon like ultimately suggested it, and that's kind of how I fell down that rabbit hole. But either way, the one that I've got in my little Amazon storefront, or I know I've linked it a couple times in the comment section, is the gold that I used for that. I'm still kind of looking around for what to me is a nice realistic looking silver. If anybody has any suggestions, feel free to leave a link. It's not like I don't need an excuse to buy more filament. That's the general conundrum for all of us, isn't it? I've also got a link to all of the transparent filament colors that I use, and you can even create more colors like I showed you by using a layering technique. You'll notice when I did the 3D print for the lamp, I did like yellow and then a little bit of orange and then yellow and then orange, and then I finished it with yellow. I kind of was doing that from the thought process that I had learned in art school and with various color laying, that usually the eye will see the last color that's laid down. So I was thinking I wanted a more yellow effect versus the orange, so that was why I put it on top and the bottom. But I went ahead and did that, like just doing standard, like, 2 yellow, then 2 orange, then 2 yellow and 2 orange, just to see if that would make a difference. And honestly, I laid my sample piece next to the sand piece that I had done earlier, and they look exactly the same. So even though like from an artistic brain and paint layering, I would think that would be how it works, but it turns out it doesn't really seem to matter. As long as it's an even amount, it seems to all kind of layer through, and it doesn't look any different from the front versus the back. If you like this video, please be sure to hit the like button, and if you want to see more content like this, by all means hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. I hope to see you guys in a future video, and if you have any thoughts or projects that you might be interested in me checking out or trying to create, leave a comment below. I will see you guys next time. Bye!